Hi David, this is Chris. We spoke earlier. We just got done doing your inspection. So what we want to do is we want to walk around, show you some of the findings, the bigger items. This report's going to have a lot of stuff in it, but we're going to try to focus on the bigger and the major items on this thing. You know, there's a plus and minus of this house. One of the big things with this house is that it does have a material called Louisiana Pacific or LP siding on it. Fortunately, we've only found a little bit of the material that has failed, and failing means that moisture has penetrated into it and it has basically rotted it. And that's a kind of an inherent problem with the 1990 era houses is the siding. Fortunately, only the lap siding, which is a siding that you find on the front of your house and underneath the deck area, is the LP siding. The rest of it is real T111, which is 4x8 panels, and that material is actually real wood. So that stuff's in great shape. But for the most part, the siding's in good shape. It just has deferred maintenance, which is a lot of what we found with this house. Is just that it's been a rental, just hasn't been maintained the way it should have been. So meaning that you got some areas that you probably have to re-caulk. You got to add some. You got to repaint. Some siding is missing in a few areas that you're going to want to get that addressed also. So we'll just kind of start walking around, and we'll talk about things. We'll start with the steps going up. Now, some of this stuff is because of the age of the house. Codes have changed over the past 22 years. One of the items is that these are not considered grippable handrails. They're just too wide. And so you may at some point want to change it out. Just because the codes have changed doesn't mean the house has to change with those codes. So some of these items are just going to be more recommendations for you to do for safety and to upgrade the house a little bit. As far as the garage door, couple things with that is that it's pretty beat up. You can see that your rails right here are just completely bent and deteriorated. The electronic sensors are only supposed to be 4 to 8 inches off the ground, and they have these things sitting at about 24 inches off the ground. So you're just going to want to get in here, drop them down so that they're a little bit lower. But at this point, you may end up having to do some repairs to the entire garage door assembly itself, just because it's getting worn and beat up. Garage door itself, this is a fire rated door, which is what we want. So as you can see, the hinges are loose. So you just want to come in here, probably get some bigger screws, longer screws in this thing to shore up that door. This bathroom's fine. A couple things in here. This is a fan vent coming from this bathroom. This is actually the vent coming from the downdraft for the cooktop. Being that it's in an unconditioned space like this, these really should be insulated so that as the warm air passes through there in a cool area like this, it won't create condensation. So at some point you may want to think about doing that. There's been some modifications down here, obviously. Garages are a 1 hour fire rated zone, meaning that you have to, if a fire erupts in here, it's supposed to take 20 minutes or longer for the fire to break through. When they call it 1 hour fire rating, they really mean 20 minutes. That's why garages, the ceilings and walls are sheetrocked. Well, they've come in here and for whatever reason it's modified this corner. So the sheetrock has been removed here, the sheetrock has been removed here, and the sheetrock right in here has been removed. So you don't have to remove these items because you'll need to come in here and put some 5/8 inch sheetrock on these areas to seal them back up, tape and mud it. Same as over here, you want to get some tape and mud, sheetrock tape and mud on the screw heads, the seams, things of that nature. Now, in here, our belief is that this may have just been a storage area or a shop at some point. It was probably not built like this. One of the ways you can tell is the height of the outlets. When the outlets are up this high, typically it's all been because it maybe been part of a garage or a shop at some point. The fact this is living space, you really got to be careful with it. At least you have a fire rated door, once again, to protect coming in here. However, there's no egress or escaping out of this space, meaning that they didn't put any windows or anything else in here. Now, I'm talking with Neil, thank you. Talking with Neil, I think a really great place to put a doorway in here instead of this kind of situation, because if you seal that off with a wall, then you don't have to worry about the sheetrock other than on the garage side. But right here, I think it would be a great place to put a doorway. Your stairwell comes down, the landing is right here with the steps going that way to the garage. So why not open this up and put some steps coming down into here then you can access this entire space down here.
And it would give you another egress out of here,
You
right?
see that egress that you need out of here, absolutely. Now for sleeping purposes, it really doesn't give you that. I mean, if you left that, you'd have 2 egress points out of here. That would work also. So we think what they've done is they needed to pass air flow coming through here. So this is actually an exhaust vent. It's on a timer, so it may be set up to come on and off by itself. So this is exhausting air out of here. Back in this corner, this is a fresh air intake. There's actually a vent hood on the outside of the house in this location that's allowing air to come in from outside. That exhausts it out, which is circulating the air in here, which is going to keep your moisture levels down. You're below grade, and so they may have felt like there's some really high moisture levels in here at some point. So now, looking at the walls in this trim is what's called MDF, which is kind of a low-grade trim. It's kind of a man-made product, and when it gets wet, it swells up real severely, and that's always an indication of moisture problems inside of basements or below-grade areas, and we're really not seeing anything like that.
Hey, Chris, just one other thing I just thought about too. So right where that fan is, it goes to the outside. So as living space, wouldn't that be a perfect place to put a window?
Oh, it would be a great place. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, put a window, and would give you another egress out, and actually give you light in here.
Yeah,
as well
I didn't even
too.
think about that. That'd be a great place to put some windows. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And if you put a window in there, then you have a window that can open up, and you can let fresh air in that way also. So
Yes.
there's a lot of different things you can do. That's a good point.
Okay.
All right, this is probably the biggest concern of the entire inspection. And it's a multitude of things. If you look at this deck, you can see that the concrete piers, which are embedded into the ground, at least those two are actually falling away. So you can tell what I think they've done is that I think if you look along here, there's a ledger board that's been added in right here. Meaning that I think what they did is they built the deck from here coming out to here. And I think they poured this ratty piece of concrete here to kind of shore up this hillside. Now that they've torn off this deck, this ledger board should be taken off and a new piece of siding should be reinstalled so you don't get moisture in there and damage the framing. But if you look here, it's very apparent that there's been some sloughing of this hillside because of the fact that you can see how far this pad has separated. Now there's no structural concern with this. It's something that was added in by somebody else. But this appears that it has shifted and fallen away at least a good 6 to 8 inches. And you can see that what used to be here is now sitting at the bottom of this hillside. So there's definitely known movement of this hillside over the past 24 years. Now nobody's going to be able to know whether this hillside is going to continue to settle, or if it's not going to settle. More than likely, it's going to continue to settle a little bit. But this is the beauty of what we're seeing is that the only things that have moved, from what we can tell, is the deck. This deck definitely has to be taken down and completely rebuilt. And also, this concrete has settled. Now, what I like seeing though is that when you go inside of here, there's absolutely no cracks in the slab, which tells me that this foundation and the footing and the concrete slab is stable and has been for 24 years. Now you do have some settlement and a pretty decent crack in this driveway, but when they poured the concrete for this, they probably did not prep the ground as well as they do for footings and foundations. And to be honest with you, this foundation may go down 2 or 3 feet. We don't know how far down this foundation goes. The point is that the house is stable at this point. Now, back to the deck. I mean, it sounds like the seller already knows about it. But if you look at it, you can see how it's just really sagging. We obviously have come in here and done a real nice splice that is starting to separate. So this deck, in my opinion, is just completely unstable and unsafe to use. Matter of fact, I didn't even walk out on it. Neil wouldn't let me.
Nope. Safety first.
Yep. So this is an example of failed LP siding. If you look down here, that you can actually take it and just, if I can find it, it just crumbles. So this stuff is going to have to be pulled off and replaced. but it's in surprisingly good shape. But it looks like it's more just this corner, and a lot of it's because this is your weathered side, and it's also because you got all these trees. If you just pan around, you see all the trees just overhanging the house and just shielding it, so this is really staying moist and wet over here. So it's going to have to be some repairs done over here. Now, you put this air conditioning unit in. When they cut through the wall, we don't know if they reframed for that opening. So you have these wall studs. Now let's take this window over here. When they framed for that window, there's a header, a big beam over the top of that header to hold the weight of the roof and displace it around that window. Well, now that they've cut through this wall, I know for a fact they probably cut through at least one stud, but we don't know if they did any reinforcing for that. So it might be something we want to have looked at a little bit closer. It's probably not. If these rafter tails line up with the studs, the wall studs, which they should, they've only compromised one. It probably is not going to do much of anything to it anyways. So just be aware of it. This is your dryer vent. As we were talking about down in that media room down in off the garage, we had a fresh air intake. That's what this vent appears to be doing. It's just that when that fan kicks on, it's actually sucking air up through here and being able to circulate the air in the house.
And we can see back here, this is all the T111 siding.
Yeah, this side of the house, the center of the house, and then pretty much all of this side is the T111 siding.
This is the plywood T111
yes,
too,
sir.
not the LP.
That's correct. So this is your temperature and pressure relief. It's a safety device on top of the hot water tank. That the tank gets to 150 pounds of pressure, 220 degrees, that valve is going to open up and relieve that pressure, that temperature, so that it discharges to the outside of the house. Now, two things that this is supposed to terminate within 6 inches of the ground, number one, and number two, if you put your finger inside here, it's actually wet, which tells me that temperature and pressure relief valve is leaking a little bit. Now that's kind of understandable because the hot water tank is 22 years old and that valve is probably just worn out and it's leaking by a little bit. We'll kind of get back to the hot water tank once we get in there, but it's definitely beyond its lifespan and should be replaced. Okay, as far as the roof, I'm going to estimate this roof at probably 22 years old. It's probably the original roof. And I think Neil should be able to zoom in over the front cover. You can see you have some damage and missing shingles up there. Got a lot of debris, pine needles, moss, things of that nature. So you're going to have to do some repairs. And I can't guarantee how long the roof's going to last. I mean, there's no signs in the attic of any kind of moisture leaks or stains or past leakage. So it's going to be a matter of just saying, okay, I know my roof's 22 years old. Hopefully you can get 5 years out of this thing. It might be 3 years. But I think the roof is really going to come down to what's the VA appraiser going to say about it. And you're going to have to just go from there. But just be aware, you're not going to get 10 or 15 years of life out of this roof. It's going to have to be replaced sometime probably in the next 3 to 5 years, if not sooner. That's my estimate. So, back over to here. I'm not sure if Neil will be able to zoom in, but over the top of this window, kind of behind the gutters, behind the trim board, they never put siding there. So you probably want to get inside of there and at least get a piece of siding or a piece of trim and at least get inside of there so that it's hiding and protecting the sheathing of the exterior walls.